as you've all heard now. All right, let's start talking about men and abortion and the way we talk about it. I think the first thing we need to talk about here is men and women communicate differently a lot of times, right? And I think we all understand that. Uh, we all know the book that was popular in the 90s, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, right? And I want to share a story by way of Jeff Foxworthy. And he tells a story about he gets a text, and the text says, Tom was in a car accident. Please pray for him. So Jeff goes to his wife and he says, Hey, honey, I just got a text says Tom was in a car accident. We should pray for him. And his wife said, Was Jeff driving? He said, I don't know. I just got a text said Tom was in a car accident. Please pray for him. Well, were Cheryl and the kids with him? I don't know. I just got a text said Tom was in a car accident. Please pray for him. Well, were the other drivers hurt? I don't know. I just got a text said Tom was in a car accident. Please pray for him. And she finally gets upset and says, Well, you don't know anything. What do you know? And he says, I know Tom was in a car accident. We need to pray for him. Every man I've showed that to that's married can relate. And every woman I've showed that to that's married just kind of rolls her eyes. Men communicate differently. And we know that. And that's kind of a funny way to talk about it. But let's talk about um, the studies that we found. So there was one put out by careleader.org that says men communicate through actions and the sharing of ideas or suggestions or information. And I want you to think about that quote for a minute. Men communicate through actions, the sharing of ideas or suggestions and information. It's a very direct way of communication. It's very targeted. There's a lot less words, right? We want to get at the information. Michigan State University did a study, and it talks about how men communicate their feelings. It says, but you have to be watching. Men communicate through body language, such as physical gestures, facial changes, muscle tensing, gritting of teeth, these kind of things. So this is all a precursor to say when a man comes into your center, if he's coming in to be a volunteer, if he's coming in to receive healing, when he comes in, you have to watch, right? And so you have to be focused on him. And we talked about that last week, focusing on the man. You have to be focused on his face and what it's doing, how he's sitting, if his fists are clenched or if he's kind of doing this with his teeth. A lot of that will tell you where that man's at and what he's feeling. The next thing we need to think about is the language we use. How we speak to men has to speak to them. Now, what do I mean by that? When talking to men, it can't be too touchy-feely, right? There's a lot of phrases that don't resonate with a lot of men. If you don't believe me, go out with another couple and watch how the women interact in the beginning and how the men, or if there's news shared, how the men interact and how the women interact. But I say not too touchy-feely, but I also have to say we can't ignore emotions or diminish emotions. So there's a fine line we're walking and how to communicate that they understand. Men's Life Australia published an article that said men tend to want to address the problem that needs solving or make a point. In other words, they want to get after the thing, whatever the thing is. And so it's not being devoid of emotion, it's being more focused. Also, what that tells us is that men don't want to talk something to death, for lack of a better way to put it. Once they share the problem, they're most interested in now fixing it, not sharing about it. One of the biggest communication foibles that we had in my relationship with my wife that we corrected is when one of us starts talking, the other one asks a question. Do you want a solution or sympathy? In other words, do you want me to listen or try to fix it, right? Because my propensity as a man is I want to try to fix it. You may just want to say whatever it is you need to say. You may just want to get it out but I want to fix it. And we're learning, and we have learned that a lot of guys are wired like that. The other thing is communication with a man needs to be direct and honest and authentic. So when you're approaching a man this way, it can lead them to acknowledging the problem, and it can open a path to solutions. I want to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Let's talk about asking questions. Now, one of the first things about talking to men and asking questions is that you don't have to tell a man he's in a safe space. A man will know he's in a safe space, or he'll know he's not. He'll know by your actions and by your authentic interest in whatever he's saying. And the truth of the matter is, folks, he'll know that because he's not likely experienced that a lot in life. And so he's more aware of it. You've heard the old thing, women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally, right? Men are loved because they produce or provide something. So his experience with sharing has often been a lack of authentic interest in what he's really dealing with. And you have to be aware of that, because if you come off as having an agenda or trying to drive the conversation or drive his thoughts or his actions, that'll come off as inauthentic and you'll lose him. Now, when we talk about asking questions, we talked about this a little bit last month, and what I want to share about is what I call the 4x4 method that I learned years ago. And that's 4 questions wide and 4 deep. Now, a lot of people ask me, so what are the 4 questions? And there aren't a set questions. And what I mean by that is it'll be determined by the guy you're talking to. You will learn what questions to ask by asking questions. And each question, the answer, whatever it may be, will inform what the next question is. And so that's how we show authentic interest in this guy and whatever he's dealing with without an agenda, without trying to drive him to our point. We find out who he's really is, what he really needs, and what he's really dealing with in that moment. And I guarantee you, if you're really listening and you really let that next question inform the next question, by the time you get 4 deep, you'll know more about this guy than most people in his circle. And when we find out that much information, then you're able to truly help him with whatever it is he needs. The other thing under this is, and this is really important, and honestly, it took me a long time to learn. I had no idea in my 20s, for example, when I was in other recovery groups like ACOA and Gathering of Men and those kind of things. And that's this: don't tell him what he needs to know. Tell him what worked for you and or what you think you know. Now, I know that sounds like semantical hair splitting, right? But it's not. If you tell a guy who shares a problem or whatever he's going through or whatever he's dealing with you, and then your follow-up to him is to say, hey, I know what you need to do, you're going to lose him a lot of times. Guys don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that, right? And most of the people I talked to when I was young didn't want to hear that. But what's truly effective, because remember, guys want solutions and they want to fix the problem. But for lack of a better way to put it, they need to be a participant in fixing the problem. And so when I share with somebody, look, this is what worked for me, this is what I did. And I say it in my books, in the recovery guide I wrote, and everywhere I talk with support after abortion, I talk about what I think I know today. And that's not a cop out. That's me opening myself up in a very vulnerable way and saying, look, this is what's worked and this is what I've learned, but I don't have it all figured out. Maybe this will work for you. And it gives a man the freedom to say, hey, yeah, you know what? That will work. Or, man, maybe I'll try something different. And so when you offer solutions, it must come from a place of what's worked for you. Again, allowing him then the freedom to problem solve the next step based on the options that you shared. I hope that makes sense. And again, the way we draw men out, the way we draw a man out to share what's really going on is by being our authentic selves. With Support After Abortion, I talked to men from all over the country, some from other parts of the world. And when I share honestly what my struggles were and what I did about them, those men are more likely to share their struggle and what they really need. And if they won't share what they really need, then there's literally no way I can help them. And I think we all see that and see the truth in that. The other thing I want to talk about is that hurting men stay away. We talked a little bit last week statistically about disenfranchised grief and emotional invalidation. Disenfranchised grief, your pain isn't real. And emotional invalidation, your emotions don't count. Support After Abortion, when we released the white paper last year, we had an opportunity to release op-eds and do interviews in several national level media outlets, Newsweek, Fox News, Washington Stand, The Examiner. There were thousands of comments that came in. And I'll share a couple of them with you. Shut up. You're a man and your feelings don't matter. Men can't grieve abortion. They chose it. They deserve to feel bad. And one of the most egregious that was directed at me at one of my op-eds, I hope he has a daughter. And if she does, I hope she's raped. Then we'll see what he thinks about abortion. Now, why do I share this? Because that's a real thing. Now, for me, 15 years into my healing journey, that didn't bother me. Like on an emotional level, I didn't have a panic attack or anything. Our executive director checked in with me to see if I was okay. And I was. And what I told her and what I'll tell you all today, what I thought about as I read those comments, and by the way, eventually I just stopped reading them. I got the point. But what I want to share with you guys today is that what I kept thinking about was that guy reading those who hasn't told anybody about his abortion experience. The guy that's still in his pain, in his shame, that's scared to talk about it because he's been told he's a man and his feelings don't matter. Those kind of comments push him further away from healing. But there's another kind of comment that pushes men away from healing too. When I was 18 and I was sitting on the steps of the abortion clinic and my girlfriend and her mom were inside, out in the parking lot, there were poster boards on the ground. And they said things like burn in hell and baby killer, stuff like that. We had one comment in one of our media releases that said, my church and my family will judge and condemn me. I can't talk about it. My
Greg,
wife and I don't know who to turn to. We were both in ministry.
Greg, I just
Yeah,
want to break in for a second and let you know that your desktop is showing.
my desktop,
Yep,
not
not a
that.
slideshow.
How about my slideshow now?
Not yet, still your desktop.
Well, thank you for breaking in. I apologize, folks. How about now?
You are now sharing the slides.
Okay, thank you. All right. That's fun. Yeah, so sorry about that, guys and gals. But back to the thing. So as a young kid, confused and not knowing where to turn and who to turn to and what to even do with what was going on, um, I heard the messages that I just shared, similar things that were in our op-eds and so on. The shut up, your feelings don't matter, you're a man, it's none of your business. But then from the pro-life groups, a lot of them, the loudest voices anyway, it was baby killer, you're going to burn in hell. That puts a man in a place where he literally has no idea who to talk to or if he even should talk to anybody. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And I think that's part of the reason with some of the other things we've talked about why men sometimes are decades past an abortion experience and still have never mentioned it. The number of guys who have come up to me and shared over the years that, hey, look, I've never told anybody this before, but 10 years ago, 30 years ago, the longest standing one was 57 years ago. And he said, I'd never told anybody this before. That's what we have to work to stop. And that's part of what we're talking about here. How do we get guys to talk? And how do we get them plugged into the help they need? The other thing I want to talk about is I guess the best way to say it is most men's pain is motivated by fear. Um, we know men express anger first, oftentimes, right? And just below the anger is fear, and then just below the fear is whatever's really going on. We know that to be true. So, what do we do with that fear? What do we do with that guy that comes in and he's scared? Um, I when I talk to guys that are abortion minded, I try to encourage them. Look, I was scared too. Look, I was where you're at, and here's how that played out for me, and maybe it can be different for you. So I can't talk to every guy, right, that's abortion minded, but so we have to have an understanding of what these fears are. Now, there's an article in All Pro Dads that spoke to men's biggest fears, and it said there were five of them. So the first one is failing. Now we can apply that to an abortion minded man, and we can apply that to a man who's experienced abortion loss and could benefit from healing. How? Well, an abortion minded man is likely afraid that he will fail as a father or he will fail as a provider. Um, and we hear that all the time from guys. Now, with the world of recovery and just what we talked about with the different messages guys get, a lot of guys are afraid of failing recovery, meaning either God won't forgive me or I can't forgive myself or I'll never feel any different. I'll never feel better. When you live with something for years and years and years, some kind of pain, it becomes really, really difficult to imagine a world without that pain, if that makes sense. Um, it almost becomes a part of you. The second thing that all pro dads said that most men fear being incompetent. Now, that applies to the abortion minded man. I've talked to a lot of guys. I don't know how to be a dad. I didn't have a good example of being a dad. Um, and what I tell them is you learn as you go, right? There's no manual for parenting. We all know that. But for the healing man, again, feeling of being incompetent, I don't know enough. I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to go. Our study showed 83% of men wanted hope, healing, help, tried to find it, could have benefited from it, but only 18% knew where to go. So I don't know what to do. That's a very real feeling in a lot of men and a very real fear. And by the way, all of these I've experienced at one point or another in my life. Number three, fear for men being perceived as or being weak or perceived as weak. Now, again, if we contrast the abortion minded man with the healing, being perceived as weak, well, there are a lot of messages out there that say a strong man just supports the woman and what she wants. Um, but more to the recovery side, this is a really big thing. And guys say this a lot without actually saying it. The fear of being weak or perceived as weak. I'm a man. Take care of this. I got this, right? I don't need help. I asked God to forgive me. God forgave me. I'm fine. Moving on. Let's go. I can't tell you the hundreds of times I've heard that from guys in one form or another, whether they say that or not. Well, they don't believe it. Not really. What they do believe is that they're afraid of being perceived as weak. And to a lot of men, unfortunately, and this is absolutely the wrong information, but to a lot of men, weakness is asking for help. Weakness is saying, I can't do this on my own, right? The first step, if you're familiar with the 12 steps, um, admitted I was powerless over whatever and my life had become unmanageable. That the first is the first step. And a lot of guys are afraid of that. They're afraid to be perceived as weak. They don't realize that there's great strength in asking for help. And that's a message we have to change. We have to help change. Number 4, and this plays in to the whole thing, being irrelevant. This is disenfranchised grief and emotional invalidation wrapped into one. My feelings don't matter. My feelings are irrelevant. My opinion on the abortion, either before it or after it, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. I'm not the woman. I'm just the man. And all the other vile things that we see online that people say about that, right? Now, this carries over into every aspect of a man's life. A man wants to think at the end of the day, he matters. What he did matters. What he does matters. It doesn't matter whether he's a neurosurgeon or a plumber. Every man wants to feel like what he does matters and that his life is relevant, that it means something. Um, so that's a manhood thing in general. But when we look at healing, if you feel irrelevant as a man, if you feel like your opinion doesn't matter, if you feel like you're not even supposed to have thoughts or feelings about an abortion, I don't know how you could feel any more irrelevant. And that's something we need to break out of. Number 5, and this is a number 5 on our list of 5, looking foolish. The number 5 biggest fear for men is looking foolish. Now, I've done informal polls over guys I talk with, and what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to look foolish? The number one thing, and this is not a formal thing, y'all. Okay, this is just talking to guys and recovery and healing over the last couple of years. One of the biggest things guys have said is crying in front of strangers. They feel like that would make them look foolish. So what that translates to is showing emotion in front of people, right? They feel like that would make them look foolish. And if that's one of your biggest fears, looking foolish, you're going to try to hold that emotion back as best you can. And the other thing was not knowing the answer. I'll give you an example. I spent a good portion of my life as a carpenter. I was a decent carpenter. I am not a mechanic, an auto mechanic at all. And every time I try to work on one of my vehicles and I have to call somebody and ask questions or try to figure it out how to do it, I feel foolish. I feel embarrassed. I feel like I'm somehow less because I don't know how to work on a car. Um, thank goodness YouTube exists now, right? I can go watch some stranger do it and not have to worry about talking to people about it. But it may seem like a silly example to you, but it's a very real thing. When I was a carpenter, I can't tell you the number of brilliant, accomplished professional men that would come out while I was building a deck or putting on a room addition or whatever and would say to me, yeah, I always want to learn how to do this. And they start making excuses for how they didn't know how to do it, right? One guy literally had 3 doctorate degrees and he's telling me how he feels bad because he can't put 2 boards together. It's a very real thing to guys. And if we speak to it, if we're aware of it, if we're aware of these fears, looking foolish, being irrelevant, being weak or perceived as weak, being incompetent or perceived as incompetent, and number one, the fear of failing. If we're aware that those are the five biggest fears men are dealing with, it helps us understand how to talk to them better because we can speak to those fears. And to circle back to a minute ago, we can speak to those fears with open-ended questions. But we don't ask, are you afraid of blank? Go back to that 4x4 model. We ask questions and we let those questions lead to the next question. And we walk through that process with these five things in mind, right? These five fears that men have. And eventually we get to what they're really scared of and what's behind that. When my wife told me she was pregnant with our now 24, almost 25-year-old, I was scared to death. What was I afraid of? I was afraid of being incompetent, afraid I was going to fail as a dad. I was afraid I'd look foolish. Why? Okay, well, when we get behind that, then we find out, I had a father who abandoned me at 6 and an abusive stepdad. So when you're talking to a guy and his fears are maybe what I just shared with you, know that behind that is what's really going on. That's what's triggering that fear. That's what's propelling that fear forward. And we have to be aware of it so that, again, we can speak to that fear and we can do it by asking good questions and truly listening to what this guy has to say. And I know I said it at the beginning and I'm going to say it again because I think it's that important. When we approach a man like that, again, not with an agenda, not trying to tell him what he needs to know or do, but really a true and heartfelt interest in where he's at, who he is, and what he's doing with or what he's dealing with. When we approach a man in that way and we're truly open to what he's sharing, y'all, you may be the first person that's ever done that in his life. You may be sitting down with a 25, 35, 50-year-old man who has never experienced anybody talking to him like that. And that conversation and that level of conversation may be the absolute difference in what helps him find a healing journey. And I'm sorry I'm getting all excited about it, but to me, it's really, really just that important. So let's breeze back over kind of what we've been talking about. The first thing, men think and communicate differently than women. That doesn't mean men and women are diametrically opposed and therefore they can never figure it. It's not what I'm saying. And there's a lot of overlap. I get that too. But men and women do communicate differently. And so when we approach a man, we have to approach a man in a way that he'll receive it. The second thing is men need to know and to sense, to be able to feel that you're authentic, that your interest in them is authentic. When you're talking to a guy that comes into your facility, are you looking at your watch or at the clock? Are you checking your phone, even though it's off and you're not answering it? Do you keep doing this number? He needs to know that you're authentic and that you're interested in him and his problem and what he's dealing with. Also, we need to help reverse disenfranchised grief and emotional invalidation. Men may not readily talk about their feelings as much as women do in a lot of cases, but men do have feelings and emotions, and they need to know that they're valid, that the way they're feeling is valid and that it's important. The other thing is we need to speak encouragement to men who are abortion minded and encouragement to men who have experienced abortion. We need to encourage both, and both need healing and both need help. And then we need to ask authentic questions and truly listen. And remember, and I'm going to say these one more time, we need to speak to, within our mind, we need to speak to the five biggest fears that men have: the fear of failing, the fear of being incompetent or perceived as incompetent, the fear of being weak or perceived as weak, the fear of being irrelevant. And remember, that's where we tied in disenfranchised grief and emotional invalidation. And finally, the fear of looking foolish. And we do all these things by giving men the opportunity to talk and share openly and for us to listen openly. And you must ask questions and truly listen to know what that encouragement is going to look like for each guy. So I got through this a little bit quicker than I intended, which is fine because that just gives us a few minutes for questions and to cover a few things at the end. I would go ahead and open this up for questions. I would also say, and I'm going to share my screen again here real quick, folks, that while we're doing some questions, if you all could go ahead and just take a minute, and there's a QR code there on the screen right now. It'll just take you a minute or two to go ahead and fill out the survey and let us know how we're doing, what we could do different for you, what we could do better going forward. That would be a huge benefit. If you have a question, go ahead and dump it in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll get to you just as soon as we can. Christina's going to put a link in for the survey into the chat as well, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can get in here and get after your questions. Okay, we have the survey in there. Julie asked, can you give a role play example? Julie, can you come on off mute for a minute and tell me what you'd like me to role play? Okay, well, I'm waiting on Julie. Joy asked if I would share more about the 4x4 method. Yeah, so let me do that quick. The 4x4 method is something I learned um, years and years ago. And to just kind of give you an example, let's say a guy walks in and sits down in my office, and you do the normal back and forth, right? Say, hey, how you doing? How's it going? I'm doing pretty good. Okay. Well, it brings you in today. Well, my girlfriend, I think she's pregnant. She's in there getting an ultrasound. Oh, were you guys planning on having a child? Or were you guys planning on a pregnancy at this point? Oh, no, we weren't planning on that. Okay, well, how did you get there? Well, I tell you, this and that and the other. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And he says whatever he says. How do you feel about that? Now, when you ask a guy how he feels that early on, you're not going to get a deep answer. What you're going to get is, oh, I don't know, or I guess it's okay, or it's her decision. So let's say in this example, he says, oh, I don't know. I mean, it's not really my decision. I'm the guy, right? Yeah, maybe it's not your decision, but do you have a feeling at all about it? I mean, just between me and you? Oh man, I guess I'm kind of scared. I didn't expect this. Oh, well, I can understand that. What are you scared of? What do you think's causing the fear? I don't know, man. I mean, I work at a warehouse. I only make 16 bucks an hour, and I mean, like now I'm going to be a dad. I don't know what to do with that. I don't even know how to be a dad. I'm 20 years old. Oh, are you close with your father? No, no, I don't really talk to my dad. He was an alcoholic, and we don't spend a lot of time together. Okay, so you think you're scared of being a dad? Maybe like you don't know how that would work, or how fathering is that kind of the thing you're saying? And let me pause here for a minute, folks. I ask it kind of like that in kind of a herky jerky kind of way because I'm not trying to really drive him, but I'm trying to give him some ideas of like maybe think about this. Um, and so at that point, he'll start talking. Well, yeah, I mean, how am I supposed to know how to be a dad? I mean, my dad was never there. He didn't teach me anything. Okay, so John, if I hear you, you're kind of scared. You're not really sure how to be a dad. You don't think you should really get to have an opinion about this whole pregnancy thing, and you're afraid you can't take care of your family if you do have a baby. Okay. In just a couple minutes, I got to three very big fears for this guy. Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Now I can start picking those off and dealing with them one at a time in whatever way makes sense. There's a guy at a pregnancy center up in Holland, Michigan, I've talked to a few times, and they're starting to roll out, make connections, I should say. They're not doing their own program, but with groups that provide skilled trades training, for example. So a guy comes in, he's like, man, I'm working part-time at Starbucks. I can't afford a kid. Oh, have, are you in college? No, I'm not in college. I don't have the money for college. Oh, well, have you thought about the trades? Well, I don't know how to get into the trades. Well, I tell you what, I know a guy. And he connects him to some kind of job training. That answers that question. I don't get to have an opinion about this. That's a big one. It comes up a lot. And that just brings more questions. Why don't you think you get to have an opinion? Well, because I was told, woman's body, woman's choice. Yeah, I've heard that too. But you created this pregnancy too, right? Yeah, oh yeah, I guess I did. Okay, well then you got to have some kind of opinion about it. I mean, you're a participant in it. That's a little tougher nut to crack, and it takes a lot of sort of banging around the perimeter to get to get through the shell, if you will, into him actually talking. Because so many guys, especially the two generations behind me, have been convinced that they don't get to have an opinion. And then I don't know how to be a dad. So there's a lot of organizations now that are connecting to and offering fathering programs, just like they do for moms at different pregnancy centers. Um, they offer programs on how to help dads be dads, right? How do you change a diaper? How do you make a bottle? How do you do whatever? So all these issues, excuse me, are surmountable, but we have to wade through these questions to get, 3 or 4 layers deep to figure out exactly what's bugging this guy. And we don't know without asking those questions. And I hope that made sense. That was at least a little bit effective. It's hard to um, role play with myself, but that's
Greg,
that.
That
do
was
you want
very,
to
listen, Julie, that was very helpful. I appreciate it.
Oh, terrific. Good. Christina, what?
Do you want to bring Julie in to do a quick role play?
Yeah, if Julie wants to come on.
Do you want to come on, Julie, and do a role play example?
Well, basically, I think he answered my question. I teach a abortion recovery called The Exchange with a Bria Medical Clinic for women. And so a lot of times I get men coming in, or the women will say something when I ask the questions like, how does your boyfriend or your husband, how does he feel about, the choices that you're thinking about or what have you? And then they'll say, oh, well, he doesn't really say anything. He says it's my body. So I always encourage the women to kind of have conversations where the men have, it's not just her body. I mean, he was involved in it as well. And a lot of times when they go back and they have those conversations with men, they'll find out that they really didn't want the abortion, but they were just afraid to say, or they didn't want, it's her body and that kind of thing. So role playing for me is sort of like from a woman talking with the men, because we don't have a men's group right now. We're working on it, but so it's kind of, how do I handle? And I think you kind of answered some of my questions.
Well, and if you need help or some direction or suggestions on how to get a men's program up and going, I'd love to talk to you at another time outside the meeting, and the resources we have at Support After Abortion. I mean, we'd love to make them available to you to help that process along. And you said something, and it also ties into a question here in the chat that I want to address real quick. And the question says, is it easier for men to open up to another man versus a woman? Okay. So my direct to the point answer is, it depends. Uh, Hope that's helpful. Now, it really does. For a long time, I thought it was 100% better for a man to talk to a man. And maybe in a lot of cases it is. But here's the thing that I've been learning over the years in my own recovery journey is that while a lot of men experience confusion about manhood because of father wounds, a lot of men also have mother wounds. And so affirmation and validation from a woman is a good thing. A man will open up to a woman if he feels like she's authentic and safe and there to help. So is it ideal to have men or a man working in your center or your facility that can um, talk to the men that come in? Yeah, that would be preferable if possible. But is it absolutely necessary? No. A woman can do just as good a job connecting a man to healing as a man can. We work with what we got, right? And I think that if a woman comes at it in the approach that we've talked about here today, I think she can be effective and impactful. So that's my 2 cents on that. Do I have a slide that lists the 5 things men are afraid of? No, but before this is over, I will cut and paste it into the chat. Um, let me actually get that real quick while I'm thinking of it. Because I think they're important. And let me, pardon me for a minute. I'm trying to do 2 things at once. And I want to make sure everybody gets that. And there it is. There's our list. All right. Now, the other thing I want to talk about while we're talking about wounds and childhood wounds and so on is I want to talk about unraveled roots. Now, most of you that are familiar with support after abortion are familiar with Unraveled Roots, the product we have out. Unraveled Roots, we're doing a group coming up starting April 8th. It'll run through May 13th. It'll be on Mondays from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. And it's a Unraveled Roots healing group. It's going to be co-ed and it's going to be for group leaders. Karen Barbito, another staff member at Support After Abortion, and I did a co-ed Unraveled Roots group together. And again, this is where we're learning, right? We should all be learning and questioning what we think we know. When the idea came up to do a co-ed Unraveled Roots group, because Unraveled Roots, look, we explore the roots of abandonment, addiction, abuse, codependency, all these things that impact us in childhood and carry over into adulthood. I didn't think it was going to work, y'all. I didn't think a co-ed group with this subject matter was going to be the best opportunity, but it was amazing. The men and the women, the amount of sharing, and so we decided to put this group together for leaders, men and women. It's a 6-week program. Again, Mondays, April 8th through the 13th, 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. There's a QR code right there. You can click on that. You can email me for more information, greg@supportafterabortion.com. If you don't get the registration link today or you're watching this later and you're like, what was that? Email me. I'd be happy to plug you in. And I really want to see more men show up for this. So dealing with those childhood issues is hugely important. Anyway, that plug out of the way. Do we have any other questions? Somebody asked for my information. I'm going to go ahead and put my email right down in here in the chat. And I've lost track of the chat questions, doing too many things here. So what other questions do we have, folks?
The last question that came in here says, Sheila says, I'm working on a post-abortion screening tool for callers to pregnancy decision line. Any suggestions for a screening tool for men?
We do have intake forms available here at Support After Abortion. If you can email me, I will make those available to you, and they're editable. But yeah, we have those available, and we'd be happy to share with you if that'll help.
Okay, I also have someone sent me a message and it says, if men really present anger first, how do you get past that and get them to talk?
Okay, so that's a great question. An angry person in front of you, especially a stranger, can be kind of a scary thing, right? I it triggers stuff for me, right? So if a man's presenting anger first, the first thing I would do is acknowledge that he's angry and then ask him why. But you have to keep in your mind what we've talked about this whole time together today, which is behind that anger is fear. He's afraid of something. Now, if you sit an angry man down and say, "Hey, you look mad. What are you scared of?" Probably not the way we want to do that, right? Probably not. But you have to ask them, acknowledge their anger and ask them what they're angry about. Get them talking, get them to share. If a man feels heard, some of that anger is going to dissipate. Other emotions may come in its place, but some of the anger is going to dissipate. And so if you get them to talk and get them to talk about what they're angry about, then talking down through the next layer of questions based on what they answer, you'll eventually get to that fear and then get to what's going on. But they have to know that they're being heard. Most men express anger in a situation when they feel like they're not being heard or validated. Really, it triggers the 5 fears that we talked about. So get them talking, get to what they're afraid of, and get them to acknowledge what caused that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. If we have time for one more question, I do have one more that came in. It says, what does authentic language look like?
Wow. Okay. A great question. Authentic language. Part of that is talking how you talk. And I'll give you an example. I use the term dude a lot. I use the term bro a lot. Um, I'll sometimes refer to a guy I bumped into as I bumped into that cat at the store. I get not everybody talks like a beatnik from the 50s, right? And I'm not saying everybody should, but part of authentic language is being authentically you. Um, I say y'all a lot. I have a little bit of a twang in my voice, and I just let that be part of who I am, right? I'm not super formal. I'm not, I could use $10 words all day long. That's really not who I am. So I don't. It's that kind of thing. So part of being authentic is first being authentically you, being yourself in front of whomever you're talking to, especially if you're talking to a guy who's looking for healing or is abortion minded. He needs, again, like we said earlier, to know that you're real. The other thing is when you make validating statements or when you ask questions, they need to be centered in the truth of how you would say something. Um, it's, I guess that's the best way to say it. I would never say, um, "Thank you for sharing how you feel. Do you feel validated and heard now that you've shared that with me?" Now, the phrases I just used, there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking somebody that are talking like that. I don't talk like that. So that would sound really funny coming from me, right? But I need to communicate those same things just in whatever way makes sense for me. I need to be validating, excuse me. Well, I need to be validated too, but I need to be validating. I need to let the other person I'm talking to know that they were heard. I need them to know that their feelings matter, but I need to do it in a way that's real for how I speak. And then it'll come off as authentic. Because, like we talked about, guys can sense authenticity and they can sense when somebody's not being authentic. Hope that answers that question. Um, Well, another one of our staff members, Amanda Hoff, said that I had a provider share with me yesterday that she tells participants to come authentically as you are, and I'm going to come authentically as I am, and to be flexible and remove agenda completely. Man, I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Come authentically as you are, and I'm going to come as authentically as I am. That is absolutely terrific. And if Amanda had said that before I went on that 90-second diatribe, she could have saved 90 seconds. Yeah, I don't think you can say it any better than that. Come authentically, just as you are. And that's one of the beautiful things about Support After Abortion. They've accepted me just as I am, right? They let me be my authentic self and communicate to people in a way that makes sense. The next thing I want to talk about, as we start to wind down here today, a couple of opportunities coming up. The third Wednesday of every month at noon Eastern time, we have an abortion healing provider webinar. You can register now for the March 20th meeting, which is just around the corner. In fact, exactly 1 week from today. This is a healing provider webinar for abortion healing providers. We cover topics every month that try to help you in the work you're doing and reaching people in your centers. The next Men's Healing Matters. Again, it's the second Wednesday of every month from noon Eastern time to 1 o'clock. Next one will be April 10th. And that one, we are going to talk a little bit about the male volunteer. And just to give you a little sneak peek, if you will, I talked to a lot of different centers who are having trouble attracting male volunteers, or they get them and there's a bit of attrition. They don't stay around a lot. And so we're going to talk about some of the qualities in a male volunteer, some of the training and instruction and assistance that they need to be effective and impactful. And we're going to talk about some of the facilities I work with around the country who have a growing and fairly robust male volunteer base and male ministry wing, if you will, of their centers. So Monica said, I see only registration for today. Christina's working on that. We'll get the right registration to you. And that's about all I have for today, folks. I can take another question or two if we have a last one. I hope you did the surveys. Again, we'd love to hear from you. We would love to see you at the Abortion Healing Provider webinar next Wednesday at noon. That would be the 20th. And as always, know that we're here to support you, Support After Abortion. We're here to help them in any way we can with your work and reaching people with the message of hope and healing. My email is posted in the chat a minute ago. It's been on a few things. If you have questions, if you're trying to do a men's program, anything at all, please reach out to me directly. I'm available. I'm here to help, and I will do anything I can for you. And I don't see any more questions popping up. So thank you. Thank you all for attending today and participating. I hope you took away some value. And again, keep up the good work. We're all pulling for you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.